Today, my wife and I will embark on an overland journey that we've been planning for months. This will take us across the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, see countless sights, cover hundreds of miles. We begin this journey in Sault Ste. Marie. For the past 7 years, I've called Sault Ste. Marie home. It's where I earned my college degree, it's where I met my wife, it's where we got married, and where our kids were born. But today, we say goodbye to Sault Ste. Marie and the state of Michigan. We knew before we left there were lots of things we wanted to check off our bucket list, lots of areas we wanted to explore, so we decided to begin planning a week-long overland adventure before we said goodbye. So join us as we explore miles of remote off-road trails, immerse ourselves in the history of Michigan, and search for some amazing remote camp spots all across the Upper Peninsula. We spent many months planning this trip, from researching potential off-road trails to finding campsites, and even attractions such as the mine tour that we went on. We wanted to make sure that we had the best trip possible, and that took a lot of time researching on the internet. The exterior of the truck features many upgrades, including Diodynamics lights, oversized off-road tires, rock sliders, and a rooftop tent sitting atop an extrusion overland bed rack. This allows the bed of the truck to remain mostly empty and allows us to store other camp goods, such as all of our camp kitchen gear. We mostly cooked on the Blackstone griddle and stored the majority of our food inside this 12-volt fridge. Since we were traveling to a remote part of the state, in addition to our cell phones, we brought a Zoleo satellite communication device and multiple B-Tech radios so we would be able to communicate no matter where we were. The first leg of our trip brings us from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, across to Marquette. While this was mostly done on paved roads, there was a brief break to recover a stuck side-by-side that had buried itself above the wheels in mud just off of the main road. Our first stop brought us to the grocery store. We wanted to stock up on all the food we'd need for the week, although we did make a couple stops throughout the trip. We weren't totally sure about timing for the first night, so we decided to play it safe and reserve a spot in a campground. And I will say, it did have some perks.
Day one, I've got some coffee going on the Blackstone here. Nice little fire going. Hannah's over here cutting up food for breakfast. What are we having today, Hannah?
We're having breakfast hash.
Outstanding. We are staying at a rustic campground outside of Marquette. We weren't sure what time we'd get in, so we wanted to have something planned like this. But almost nobody here. This area is big on mountain biking, and we're the only vehicle around here that doesn't have a mountain bike on. Which makes me a little sad that I didn't bring my bike. They've got some really cool trails around here, and just back over there, they've got a cool little skills park. They've got some jumps and ramps and stuff that I wish I was over there hitting right now.
We topped off our water jugs at the faucet in the campground before we left. We were carrying over 13 gallons of water, which was more than we needed, but it was nice to know you had it. We made our way over to Sugarloaf Mountain, which is just outside of Marquette and has beautiful hiking trails that offer stunning views at the top. The hiking trails weren't super technical, but they were a bit rocky. There were lots of historical signs all the way up, explaining a lot of interesting facts about the area. When you made it to the top of the reviewing platforms that offered stunning views in all directions, we were able to see downtown Marquette and out into Lake Superior. We even saw a freighter while we were up here. You can also see the stairs that bring you up the last bit of the trail, so you don't have to worry about bringing any rock climbing gear to get up here. Welcome to Canyon Falls. These waterfalls are just a short hike off a roadside park, which we almost didn't stop at, but we figured if they spent the time and money to put up a sign that said waterfall, we should check it out. And I'm glad we did.
This is the 60-foot tall shrine to Bishop Baraga, who's the first bishop of the Diocese of Marquette. This is just above Highway 41, beautiful bay. This is just outside Lons, and that's actually the town of Baraga across the way. All right, Hannah, what did we learn about Bishop Baraga?
So apparently he snowshoed over 700 miles across the UP, going between Native American villages as a missionary for the Catholic Church. So sometimes he would sleep in those villages with the people, and other times he slept on his own without a tent in the middle of the UP. So pretty darn cool.
Tonight, we'll be sleeping in the Baraga National Forest. This forest does allow dispersed camping, and luckily there wasn't a burn ban, so we were able to have a campfire.
All right, let's take a quick little tour through camp. I actually found this using the Overlander app. I just knew the area we were gonna be and started looking around, read some reviews, and this sounded like a perfect camp. Has a little fire ring that was here when we got here, and then I dug it out around it just so I didn't have to worry about starting a forest fire. And I've got my water and a shovel. There you go, Forest Service, if you're watching. Got our little camp kitchen cleaned up from dinner. Looks like I missed a dish. But we did some fish, asparagus, and potatoes on the Blackstone tonight. Worked out pretty well. We've got the tent set up, and we've actually got all of the screens opened up so we can use the screens. We were sitting up there eating dinner because the bugs were really bad. They since calmed down a little bit actually, which is kind of weird. They were just like some gnats or something, which they were almost miserable. We thought about leaving, but it is what it is. It worked out perfectly. Coming around here, we've got the fridge, which is working really well. Talk about that later a little bit more, the issues we had today. Nothing serious, but. And over here, we've got the camp shower. This is the Coleman solar shower. Hannah, what's your review on it?
I'd say it worked pretty well. I mean, I don't have too much hair. My hair's not too long, but it's pretty thick. And I'd say I was able to shower relatively quickly and get my hair wet quickly without using a ton of water. So that was really nice.
Perfect. Yeah, so this holds about 5 gallons of water. You can see she took a shower and I did the dishes. There's a decent amount of water left, so I think we could easily make it a day or two doing dishes and showering with it. And the best part, we are right on the edge of Thayer Lake. I don't see any houses or really anything else on it. There's this trail here that we were on earlier. Looks like there's a group of people down that way, just waiting for the sunset. And I could hear another group of people over that way. So we get a little bit of fog coming in. It's gonna be a beautiful sunset tonight.
As we sit and watch the sunset, we begin making our plan for tomorrow. The goal is to make it the rest of the way up the Keweenaw Peninsula and actually camp at the very tip right on Lake Superior. We know this is a very popular area, and so our goal is to get up there early enough to make sure we can get a good sight.
Good morning. It is the start of day 2. I'm out here on the shore of Thayer Lake. It's a beautiful morning. Got a little chilly last night, but nothing too bad. Today the plan is to drive. We're going to go to the town of Gay, Michigan. I don't think we're going to stop at the Gay Bar, but might be a little early in the day for that. But there is a bar in Gay, Michigan called the Gay Bar. Look it up. It's kind of an interesting thing. And then we're going to head up to the Keweenaw, the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula. We're going to kind of snake our way right along I guess that'd be the eastern shoreline and work our way up to the tip. And the plan is to camp on the very tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula tonight.
Today our trip begins on the shores of Thayer Lake. We'll make our way down to the town of Gay, Michigan, and then up the eastern side of the Keweenaw Peninsula to the town of Copper Harbor, and eventually sleep tonight on the tip of the point. We start in the town of Gay, Michigan. This is a small town with deep history in the copper mining industry. Today, it consists of a bar, some other buildings, some houses, but not a lot going on in this town. I've seen a lot of cool videos from the Gay Bar, but we didn't have time to stop this morning. This smokestack is all that remains from the copper mining industry in Gay. This is where the copper and the bedrock were separated using stamping mills. The sand was then just dumped into the shoreline where you can drive on it today. This is one of the many waterfalls in the Upper Peninsula. This one happens to be at a roadside park, and you can easily just drive right up to it. After briefly exploring Copper Harbor, we decided it's time to begin our journey out to the point to find our camp spot for the night. Unfortunately, we were met with multiple closed gates. Side-by-sides are still able to get around to the left, but full-size vehicles can't pass this. The sign says this is done in order to protect the trails as the frost comes out of the ground, and that the gates are usually opened around the end of May or beginning of June, just all depending on the weather. Unfortunately, we had to turn around and find a different path from here.
Right there. Yeah.
When you stay right on the shores of Lake Superior, you don't have to worry about where you're getting water from. It's just the best way to get back up to your site.
Anyone familiar with camping in the Upper Peninsula knows the bugs are bad, and it held true here.
On this episode of Food Network in Paradise, we've got Chef Hannah. What are you cooking for us?
It's a variation of tacos al pastor. I know it's usually made with pork, but we have some ground beef. I have a packet of al pastor seasoning, and then some salsa and pineapples mixed together, and we're just getting some caramelization and put them on some taco shells. So
Looks pretty good.
pretty easy.
Fresh salsa we picked up at the grocery store. Pineapple was fresh at one point, and these chips are delicious.
Recently, someone installed a pit toilet bathroom. You can see that building on the left. That solved the problem of trying to bury things when you're camped on top of bedrock. It was really cool to be in an area with so many other overlanders. This is basically turning into a campground, but with like-minded people. Even with everyone out there, we barely knew anyone was there. Everyone was very quiet and respectful, and it was a great spot to spend the night. Well, we were able to accomplish our goal and get a spot right on the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula. We did have to get here about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We were the first person to set up camp, but it was definitely worth it. Luckily, we had a Zoleo device so we could look up the sunrise because there was no cell service here. It was definitely worth it to get up before 6 a.m., but we needed a little bit of coffee to keep us going for the rest of the day. We had been planning this part of the trip for a long time. We knew this was one of the main goals, was to camp on the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula, so we decided we needed to celebrate. So for breakfast today, steak and eggs.
Getting a little bit of driver's seat time for Hannah. It's a great trail to learn on. It's not super technical, but it's got a bunch of mud holes. There's a small water crossing coming up. Good confidence builder, right, Hannah?
Sure.
This will be Hannah's first actual water crossing. This is a very mild one to start with. That's a good speed. Just keep moving through. You'll be great. Good job. Let's go all the way to the top of the hill.
This is actually the beginning of US Highway 41. Today it travels nearly 2,000 miles from Michigan all the way to Florida. It got its start as a footpath used by fur traders and was slowly improved over the years into what it is now today. And maybe someday we'll be able to travel the 8 states that this highway crosses and overland the entire route. Not quite as cool as the Pan American Highway, but definitely a lot more doable.
We made it out. We are at the Copper Harbor fuel stop with some sweet old gas pumps. Got the dials and everything. Paying $4.02 for gas, which is not as bad as I was expecting up here. Figured we'd just top it off while we're here.
This was one of the most fun, yet most deceiving trails we went on for the entire trip. It started off as a well-manicured gravel road, and as we wound through the woods, I was trying to figure out why it was rated as a blue trail on Onyx. As we came around this corner, we figured out why. It's a little deceiving on the camera, but this was a steep climb with lots of large rocks and washouts from the rain over the years. But nothing that a trail boss couldn't handle.
There's a little bit of a bump coming up.
Our radios from B-Tech made it much easier to communicate going up this, because one of the only downsides of driving a full-size truck is it's hard to see over the hood. We knew we wanted to explore some of the history of the Keweenaw Peninsula. This area is rich with mining history, known for its copper mining. Shown here is one of the drills the miners would have used to retrieve that copper from underground. We toured the Forest Service Museum in the town of Calumet. This showcased everything from the rise of the copper mining industry to the heyday where there were over 90,000 people in this area, and the downturn along with some of the political turmoil and everything that goes along with this. This museum is completely free, and I would highly recommend anyone in the area to check it out, but we knew we wanted to do a little bit more than a museum.
So we are at the Quincy mine. This actually goes over 9,000 feet below the ground. Goes down here, under the road, and the actual mine's over that way. So they would hoist it up. Some of the rock would get dumped out here. The rest of it would get dumped out here into train cars. And there were cables or ropes that would go over to a steam-powered hoist over there and up and down all day long.
One very important part of the Keweenaw National Historical Park, the Quincy mine site located on the hill below.
This is a view inside the top of the main mine shaft. The cart on the left is called the dewatering cart. They would lower this to the lower levels of the mine to remove any groundwater that seeped in. The cart on the right is how the men were transported down. They would sit 3 wide for a total of 30 men on this cart and be lowered down into the mine to their working stations. The miners would work 10-hour shifts where they would then be brought back up to the surface at the end of the day. This diagram shows about what the mine would look like. You have the shaft house on the left, and this shows the depth of the number 2 shaft. We spent some time exploring the Quincy mine and then made our way down the hill to the smelter tour.
Now we're going to move ahead. Jude's is a trap door. This is where the men would then begin shoveling that crushed ore down these ore-bin chutes.
The smelting facility is where the copper would have been purified before being loaded onto boats and sent to the customer for the finished product. This is a relatively new tour, and we were actually the first people to do it this season. I'll say they did a great job, they were very knowledgeable, and they've done a good job preserving the history of this building. Afterwards, we checked into our hotel, and yes, it's not the most rustic thing in the world, but it was nice to have a weight room, a place to charge all of our devices, and even a nice bed to hang out on. We then made our way down to the waterfront, and Memorial Day in the Upper Peninsula, the water's not very warm, but it was nice and refreshing. We then explored some of the local businesses downtown, including the Keweenaw Brewing Company, which has some fantastic beers and a pretty good view. This is the twin city of Houghton and Hancock. We're in Houghton, Michigan, and Hancock's across the way. That building across the river with the smokestack is the smelting facility we toured earlier. And from the back deck of the Keweenaw Brewing Company, we had a great view up on top of the hill. You can even see the top of that number 2 mine shaft at the Quincy mine we were at this morning. The next morning, we hopped on the Bill Nichols Trail. This brought us from Houghton, Michigan, almost straight to the Adventure Mine. This old railroad grade was used to transport copper between the mines and the processing facilities. Other than one spot where the railroad trestle was removed and now it's a rocky hill, this is a very flat and fast trail that's a ton of fun to run. Unfortunately, the trail was closed in a few spots due to washouts. Luckily though, it was well marked because it would not have been any fun to hit this hole doing 60 miles an hour. We did come across these old railroad bridges. There wasn't a weight limit posted, and I figured if it was good enough to hold a train, it could certainly hold us. Luckily we made it across, and the views were spectacular. This was a series of 3 bridges, and each one had a view that was a little bit better than the last.
Well, I'm not airing up just because I got off the trail. I got a little puncture in the tire. Luckily I had a tire repair kit and I was able to fix it. Well, you can see we had a little puncture here. Luckily it was a spot that was super easy to get to. Just happened to park like this, so I got lucky. And I had a tire repair kit, so in the parking lot here, I was able to do that. Worst part was getting the lube all over my hands. I had to wash those off, but super simple. So if you don't have a repair kit in your vehicle, you definitely need to get one.
We booked a tour with the Adventure Mine Company. This is the actual name of the mine from back in the day, and they offer multiple different levels of tours. Ours was the first level, and we just stayed on the main level of the mine, walked around and explored, and learned about the history. They also offer other tours where you actually rappel down into lower levels of the mine. This isn't a sponsorship, but I would highly recommend checking these guys out if you're up there. It was really cool to actually get a first-hand experience into what it was like to be in the mine, how dark it was, and just the overall conditions. They must have known that this was an off-road themed trip, because this was how they transported you from the main entrance and gift shop up to the opening of the mine. This is a retired personnel troop transport from the military, and it works perfectly for the narrow trails in this area. Gotta say, if Clifford ever goes out on me, I might have to look into picking up one of these, or maybe just as a second vehicle. Among the many things we learned while in the mine was how to find copper. They said that usually copper is found with other minerals, and you can see that as the white streak of deposited minerals in the bedrock around it. I must say, I was caught a little bit off guard by the sheer size of the underground caverns they made. Remember, this was all done by hand. They would drive one of these stakes in, there'd be one man on either side with a sledgehammer, and drive it in. They would make a diamond pattern in the wall, and then fill it with black powder. They would then blow the black powder at the end of the day, so that the dust would be settled by the time they got there in the morning. This sign shows the sheer magnitude of this mining operation. They made multiple shafts in this mountain, and we explored just a small portion of it. It's kind of almost impossible to imagine standing on top of all of this hard work underneath us. After our tour was complete, it was back out on the trail. I'm happy to report that our trail fix for the tire worked perfectly. We had 0 air leakage and no damage to any other components. Ever since we started planning this trip, I was very excited to visit the Keweenaw. From the remote campsites to the beautiful scenery, the vast number of off-road trails, and everything in between, the Keweenaw did not disappoint. I can't wait to begin planning our next trip to this area. But that being said, this trip is far from over. These spectacular waterfalls are called Bond Falls. Ever since I first saw a picture of them a few years ago, it's been a bucket list item. Well, I'm happy to say that I was able to check it off on this trip. After we finished up at Bond Falls, we continued south into Wisconsin, which means I get to add a new sticker to my fridge. We'll only be here overnight, but it definitely seems like an area that I would love to come back in the future and explore a bit more. The benefits of staying in a campground include cheap ice cream, a swimming pool, running water, and they even had these kayaks available for us to use. There are 22 lakes in this area that are all interconnected, but we were only able to explore one.
So if you haven't picked up by now, Hannah's main responsibility on this trip is preparing the food for us. So she's going to take us through her camp kitchen.
Alrighty. So any kitchen needs some source of heat so that you can actually cook food. We've got a black stone hooked to up to our propane. Works pretty well. Nice black top. We've done a lot of, you can do some grilling. It's really good for breakfast hashes and stuff like that. So I really like doing that. My setup, at least surrounding the black stone, you got a table to hold it up at working height. I generally keep most of the supplies I'm going to be using for my meal right next to me. Paper towel, cooking utensil, and whatever else I'm going to need, and oil. This has been really nice having this little shelving unit down here. This has like my lighters, salt and pepper, more tongs, your forks, spoons, and knives, and a little egg ring, which we haven't used, but it's there. And then just like a kitchen knife. Under there, can opener, and then some extra plates. And then we've got our little off-brand jet boil thing, and a cutting board, and then some newspaper for starting fires if need be. Just having this really close to me is important. It's really easy to just bring stuff out as you need it.
And the most important part, sitting right on top.
The citronella candle, yes, very nice. And then having your trash can ready and accessible just so you can easily throw stuff in there, especially if you're working with raw meat. And then we'll move over to my lovely boxes. Most of my dry goods are in these two, the black and the green box. They kind of look like a mess, but I've got my system down with it, and everybody has their own thing, so make it work for you. Good amount of canned goods, so we've got canned chicken and beef in here, some backup canned soups if you were just like really needing something fast. Coffee, obviously, these have been really nice with our French press. Just pour a little, as much as we need in for the French press, and then just go. Spices and Nutella, peanut butter, and potatoes thrown in there, so just kind of keeping that all contained. This pot was really nice. We found a system that we could use a little grate over the Blackstone, so you could actually like warm stuff up. I use that for my buffalo chicken wraps, so I was able to like melt the cream cheese, mix it all together, and because you wouldn't be able to do that on the flat top of the Blackstone. So yeah, that's basically all the dry goods, and then some miscellaneous camping stuff, but also food related things. So extra knives, plates, bowls, more paper towel or foldable sink, more oil, wipes, French press, glasses, tin foil, the works.
Pretty much everything else.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit disorganized, but like as long as you know where everything is, that's what matters. Create a system that works for you, and that's the best I can recommend.
Looks good.
Unfortunately, our Coleman solar shower ripped. This is pretty disappointing considering we bought it right before this trip. It didn't even last us a week of use. Although it was only a few dollars, I definitely expected better quality from a company with a name like Coleman. After a relaxing evening and a good night's sleep, it was back to Michigan. Today we'd be catching up with a good friend who was actually our former priest in Sault Ste. Marie. He got stationed at a new parish, and it's been a while since we got to see him. He invited us over for lunch, and we were happy to oblige. He gave us a recommendation for hiking trails in the area. This was a short 1-mile hike to this spot, which is also known for its whitewater rafting. The owner of this company was watching from the shore and told us that these were all of the new hires for the season, training on the rapids before they took guests through. Part of this training was rescuing someone who fell out of a raft, and you can see them simulating this with a life jacket that's attached to a paddle. As we pull into camp for the night, it starts to set in that this will be our last night overlanding in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We reflect back on all the wonderful experiences and memories that we've made, and I start to realize why overlanding is so popular. It has less to do with all of the gear and cool social media posts, and more to do with spending time with those that you love and getting out and exploring the wonderful world that God has given us.
Well, we've made it to our last campsite of the trip. We are right on the Green Bay. This is the Wells State Park, and the mosquitoes love it here too. Even my mosquito hat's not really cutting it, so that's why I keep wearing this hat. I sprayed it down with DEET the first night. I keep reapplying it. Man, they are swarming. And it's, up until now, it's worked pretty well to keep the mosquitoes off. I think we're gonna have to go get into a net somewhere.
And for the final time on this trip, we fold the tent, pack up the kitchen, and load everything into the bed of the truck. At this point, we've got it down to a science. Our final stop on this trip brings us to the Big Springs, also known as Kitchitikipi. This is a freshwater spring that has been well protected, and they don't allow any boats, fishing, or even swimming. You travel across on this hand-powered raft and are treated to stunning views. You can see all the way to the bottom, you can see the many large fish, and even the water bubbling up through the sand below. There was no color grading done to the shot. That's what it actually looks like in real life. I did want to take a second and thank everyone who helped make this trip possible. I want to thank the partners of the channel. They're listed in the description box below, so make sure you show them some love. And I especially want to thank our families for watching our kids so we could take this trip. It's something we will never forget, and this would not have been possible without your help. Our story's not over, it's just time to begin the next chapter.